The number of men, women and children currently homeless in Australia runs into tens of thousands. In Newcastle alone, many will be spending tonight under park benches, in overnight refuges or wherever they can stay warm. Gary Sargent is one who has experienced their plight firsthand. Gary spent 3 days living as best he could in the inner city with only $13 in his pocket to write an article for a Sydney newspaper. He's now recorded his experiences in a book, 3 Nights on Nowhere Street, which he hopes will go some way in changing public attitudes towards the homeless. He says the problem is an enormous one, and while more funds for refuges and housing are desperately needed, these are only short-term solutions.
The long-term solution in part has to be educational. I mean, we have to be educating people from a very early age how to manage their debts and their finances and how to find niches in society and create meaning in their lives.
And do you see your book as being an educational tool in that way?
Yeah, it's the other side of the coin. I mean, part of the educational process has to be educating the people that aren't homeless about that these are human beings, these are caring human beings, they're nice people who want to make something of their lives usually.
Gary has recently returned from America, where he also researched the problem of homelessness. He says there are currently 3 million people on the streets there, and that figure is forecast to rise to 18 million in 25 years. He says Australians must confront the problem here before we reach such a crisis situation.
Australia's sort of at a value crossroads here. We can either maintain our caring traditions, or we're going to end up being a little America with the terrible problems that they've got there.
The 1400 metre start at Broadmeadow is a very good start, and although trainers prefer to be drawn in close to the rails on most occasions, there's not a lot of disadvantage in being drawn wide at the 1400 metres. Likewise in a staying race such as the Winfield Gold Cup, the 2300 metre barrier, horses settle down early before the first turn, and barrier positions aren't of great significance.
What about the fields for both events? Are they even?
Yes, very even. In the NBN Cameron, Full Page and Tierra Wrist are outstanding horses at the top of the weights, but they'll have stiff competition from the lighter weights such as Appreciation and True Reason. And in the Winfield Gold Cup, we're rather proud of the fact that we've drawn 3 horses to carry 56 and 1 to carry 55 kgs, which is an indication of the class of the horse that's there.
The track looks in excellent condition.
Yes, we've had rather a mild winter as far as our track conditions are concerned, and the recent rain, and then I suppose we could call it spring weather this week, has really topped the track off, and if this weather continues, we'll have a fast track on Tuesday and Wednesday.
In tonight's news at 6, a preview of Newcastle's biggest race carnival. The 2-day event features the $60,000 NBN Cameron Handicap tomorrow and the Winfield Gold Cup on Wednesday. Tonight we'll talk to racing expert Gary Harley on which horse he thinks can win tomorrow's NBN Cameron over 1400 metres.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Hello, I'm Janelle Provost. Last night, a 21-year-old man allegedly assaulted and bound a 64-year-old man in this house in Bolton Point. Police say he later rang them from Katoomba to tell them where the man was and also to inform them that he intended to jump off a cliff.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6.
In tonight's news at 6, this year's NBN Cameron Handicap is over for another year at the Newcastle Jockey Club. We'll look at the colour, fashions and of course the racing. As well, we'll preview tomorrow's $125,000 Winfield Gold Cup over 2300 metres.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6. President of the Newcastle Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Peter Rundle, said that overall it's a fair budget as far as this region is concerned.
A balanced budget does please us. There are some comments that some of the figures may be a bit rubbery. I think time will tell that. I think it's from the business point of view, we would rather seen the money come from further reductions in government spending rather than from higher taxation.
Because business will start to feel that higher tax.
I think the higher tax is one of the major negatives for business in investing. The government wants more private investment, but really taxation is up.
So overall, are you pleased or displeased?
Overall, I think it's a reasonable budget. The fact that interest rates are coming down is positive, as long as this predicted drop in interest rates is a continuous one, and we can see it for the next 2 or 3 years.
So overall, for the Hunter region, then summarising, is it good or bad overall?
Overall, I think it's fair, and I think it's up to us now to make sure we get the most benefit from it.
It was that very point that Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrick took up, saying we should learn from the shortcomings of the Steel Regions Assistance Scheme, which has now been prematurely finalised.
And I think where we missed out on the steel industry, we only have ourselves to blame. That we didn't get behind the program, we didn't structure programs to attract the minimum amount of money from the steel industry program. If we've learnt the lesson, then what we need to do is get those programs in place very early so that we attract the greatest amount of money from those programs, from that money that's been set aside by the government to alleviate the problems that will emerge from the coal industry.
And on the family allowance package and additional funding to industry programs, Mr Barrick described them as part of the wages accord.
Always the trade union movement position has been one of protecting those least able to protect themselves, the disadvantaged. And the family allowance package has always been part of those trade-offs for wage restraint.
The Asander is the only international rally on the Australian circuit, and this year has attracted nearly 40 drivers and navigators from Australia, Japan, New Zealand and the United Kingdom. And they're all hoping to be in front at the end of the 1,100 kilometre trail to pick up the $10,000 prize money. The rally starts tomorrow at Parramatta in Sydney with a special stage at the Amaroo Park racetrack. Then over the weekend it's on to Gosford, Newcastle, Bulahdelah, Taree and then back to the Central Coast.
The whole event is actually contained in the state forests, so it is a truly traditional rally type roads that we'll be competing on. They are in excellent condition this year. We've spent quite a considerable amount of money making sure that the roads are smooth, but at the same time very demanding and testing for the cars and drivers.
Current leader in the Australian Rally Championship, Greg Carr in his Alpha will be hard to beat. So will defending title holder Wayne Bell in his Corolla. Race headquarters over the 3-day event will be at the entrance.
The retrenchment notices for more than 1,000 coal miners from collieries across the region come into effect from the 25th of this month. For many of the men, married and with families, the plight will not be theirs alone. One group equally affected by the firings, and yet little heard of, is their wives. They too will have to face an uncertain future and deal with the stress of repayments which can no longer be made. Many will have to find additional work to help pay the bills. Today in Western, outside Cessnock, the first meeting of an organisation set up specifically to help them was held. Similar organisations have been operating for some time in the southern and western mining districts. Cessnock mayoral candidate Marie Callaghan chaired the meeting.
We hope to set up a support group for women who are affected by the retrenchments in the mine. We hope to find a few positives from a very difficult situation. It's not all doom and gloom. Our cities aren't going to become ghost towns. We're going to get out, get unemployment schemes off the ground and hopefully pick up some positives.
The Northern Coalfields Women's Auxiliary, as it will be known, will provide financial support to families in particular need, advice on legal matters such as evictions and repossession, and moral support to others in the same predicament.
Only 2 days ago, miners began returning to work when the national coal strike ended. But in the Hunter Valley, there are already strong indications of another showdown. Newcastle Wallsend, a fully owned subsidiary of Pico Wallsend, handed out a list of 45 work practice changes to miners at 3 of its collieries. At Ellalong and Pelton mines, workers rejected the changes and walked off the job. However, the Gretley mine is still operating because most of the changes do not affect workers there. General Manager of Newcastle Wallsend, Argo Kuru, says the changes are needed and believes mines can't afford to sit back any longer.
The industry and Australia indeed have known for months, many months, that there are problems in the coal industry. People have made speeches and shied away from the real problems. And in the meantime, the industry has just kept on bleeding. We, as one company, will not.
At Warkworth, miners were also confronted with a list of changes to work practices. They refused to accept them and then occupied the lunchroom, refusing to work. The Newcastle Conservatorium is best known as the cultural centrepiece of the city. More than 600 full-time and part-time students from across the region study music at the Con every week. And to give the public just a taste of the fruits of hard work, students performed selected chamber works during yesterday's open day. Upstairs, musicians studying the Con's Bachelor of Music Education degree held a recital under the watchful eyes of Principal Michael Dudman. In the Mackey Hall, the Conservatorium's Children's Orchestra performed classical works by Beethoven, Schubert and Mozart. It was also a chance for well-known conductor Errol Collins to join the young performers, while some musicians took over the baton. Meanwhile, work on the $4 million extension project is taking shape. When completed, the new concert hall will seat 500 with room for an orchestra of 120 on stage. The bicentennial project is expected to be opened in May next year, in time for the start of the school's second term. Traffic was disrupted on the Pacific Highway at Hexham for more than an hour last night as rescue squads worked to free the elderly couple from the twisted wreckage. Police say the accident happened when the 64-year-old driver attempted to turn left into the highway at the McDonald's intersection just after 6 o'clock. The vehicle pulled out into the path of oncoming traffic and collided with a semi-trailer travelling north. Police, fire and ambulance units were called to the scene. Rescue teams worked quickly to release the trapped driver and his 60-year-old wife. Both were taken by ambulance to the Mater Hospital in a stable condition, suffering lacerations and shock. Police say the driver of the semi-trailer escaped injury. The prestigious De Beers Diamonds Today 87 collection has arrived in Newcastle. Embarking on a national tour, the $1 million glittering exhibition features award-winning Australian designs.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The restructuring plan includes two major proposals which have been strongly opposed by many academics in the university. They are the reduction of the number of faculties from 8 to 4, mostly through amalgamation, and the appointment of the deans of the new faculties. Deans are currently elected by the members of the faculty board. However, if the new expanded faculties come into being, university regulations will require their deans to be appointed. Some academics fear this could lead to an hierarchical structure where allegiance is owed to those who made the appointment rather than the faculty. Vice-Chancellor of the University, Professor Keith Morgan, who is pressing for the changes, doesn't believe this would occur. He says the university needs to change to prepare for the future, and the proposals would make the best use of its scant resources. The Planning Committee will report back to the Senate with clearer options next month. Residents of Metford are angry, and they say they aren't the only ones. Many being low-income families, they bought their houses with loans given at far below the market interest rate, under a system of government subsidy. They believed that interest would increase only 0.5% per year. Now they've been told interest rates will rise 6% this year to 13.5% and continue to rise annually. The annual rise won't be noticeable at first, but its long-term effect will. Average monthly repayments will go from $269 to $823 after 20 years. Residents say their salaries won't keep pace with the increases.
I can't survive here. It's destruction for all of us because we'll never own it. The only thing we've got is we've put in our large deposits. We've all put in 10,000 and 5,000 and 20,000 depending on each house, and there's nothing left. There's no incentive to stay.
Last night, the residents held a meeting at Maitland to discuss their problems with the Department of Housing. Michael Ayres, New South Wales Director of Housing, admits there may have been misunderstanding, but denies the government has overruled any contracts.
Now, the government's conditions for these lending programs has been that the interest rate's variable. Now, there may be some cases where people have been given the wrong impression or have gathered the wrong impression, and that's something that we'll find out on a case-by-case basis.
Mr Ayres says the new rates are only a part of making sure the available funds are best used.
The government's aim isn't to throw people out of their houses, but what our aim is, the aim is to make sure that while people do get interest rate concessions on their home loans, that they pay a reasonable amount towards the home loans, subject to their income, so that the subsidy that's involved in all of these loans, when you add it all up, can be distributed as widely as possible.
Part of the Hunter region's history, spanning more than 130 years, comes to an end with the last journey today. One of the fleet of steam locomotives will make its final trip to the Stockrington colliery to pick up empty coal wagons. After the final run, the locomotives are expected to be cleaned and then stored in a shed at the Hexham siding. The line is closing as part of Coal and Allied's rationalisation plans. The shutting down of the railway, however, hasn't been without incident. On Friday, the railway workers staged an angry sit-in over the abrupt closure of the line, which was actually due to cease operations this Friday. Now, residents of the Minmi-Stockrington area are up in arms over the plans to replace the train-hauled coal with large-scale trucking. They say the trucks will have to make 60 return trips a day to haul coal from the Stockrington colliery to the Hexham washery and Port Waratah coal loader. The trucks must travel along Stockrington Road, Lanigan's Drive, and either over Lanigan's Bridge or through the township of Minmi itself. Residents of the area say these are narrow, poorly maintained roads, and any increase in heavy traffic will be very dangerous. The residents will be calling on Newcastle City Council to place a ban on the trucking until the route is assessed by the Department of Motor Transport. In the meantime, they will also be calling on Council to pressure the state government to keep the train running to stave off the need for the trucks.
Jackson had been working on the unloader at number 2 wharf when the accident happened at 7:30. Police say the man fell onto a small drum while working on an exhaust fan in the machine room. After being treated by ambulance officers, he was lowered by crane more than 40 metres in a wire stretcher. Ambulance men say Jackson felt safe throughout his ordeal as he was placed into the stretcher. The appliance was also secured to the hook of the crane for additional safety, and guide ropes were used to prevent the stretcher spinning. After a 6-minute journey through the air, the injured man was back on the ground. He was transferred to an ambulance stretcher and transported to the Royal Newcastle Hospital, where he's in a stable condition.
This year's Surf Fest will run for 9 days, from the 14th to the 22nd of November. The main event, the A-rated BHP Steel International, will carry total prize money of $42,000. Support events will include the Women's Classic, Coke Surf Trials, skimboard and longboard events, and for the first time, one of the world's richest junior pro events with $9,000 in prize money. 4 times world champion Mark Richards says the 9-day surfing spectacular will attract the world's best.
But all the guys really do love coming to Newcastle and they love competing in the Surf Fest event. It's been held 2 years previously and everyone's had a great time while they've been here. So it being an A-rated event and being one of the major events on the circuit, everyone will be here, and especially due to the fact that it looks as though we've lost some of the events on the Australian circuit this year. The Stubbies event, which is normally on in November, that one is normally an A-rated event, but this year it's a Masters event, so it won't carry any points. And the other event, the Margaret River Thriller in Western Australia, is also up in the air. So at the moment, the BHP event is the only guaranteed A-rated event in November, so we'll see all the surfers here for sure.
Meanwhile, as part of Surf Fest, Australia's first Surf Expo will be held. Organiser Phil Neat says it will be a total lifestyle exhibition.
Besides the surfboards and the surf skis and the windsurfers and the diving gear, we'll have all the accessories like the clothing and the wetsuits. There's fashion parades with all this type of thing. There's building societies and credit unions and banks. Forward drives, we've got a special forward drive torture trail being built.